Hello, good morning everyone. I would like to welcome you everyone and would like to say good morning to all of you. This month, the whole month is the Sagadawa. We call the Sagadawa as in a Western sort of like a name of the month is Sagadawa. And during this time, we as a Buddhist, we consider this month as a very precious and auspicious month, as it contains the three major activities of the Buddha. So the time when Buddha was born, and the time when Buddha got enlightened, and the time the Buddha got into parinirvana. And we as a Buddhist, even though if you contemplate and practice the positive actions and positive deeds, of course, it's always good and it's always helpful. But especially in this month, we consider it as because of its blessed, and it was so auspicious, and so many Buddha's activities come together during this month. So we consider if you practice any kind of positive actions, deeds, then it will multiply by millions of times. But being said that, it really depends on individual people's how they intend, or what their goal or what their thought it is. So it all depends on your mind. But since you have came here to listen to the teachings of the Heart Sutra, I assume like everyone has a positive thought. And when you talk about the Heart Sutra, they have 4 major Heart Sutras. Being said that, I'm really sorry because my native language is not English, so I cannot express 100% what I really want to say, but I will try my best. But when you talk about Heart Sutra, they have 4 majors, like a longest one, then a medium, and then the short, and then the shortest one. So this Heart Sutra, like maybe we just have one page. This is the shortest one. But as even though it is the shortest one, it includes everything. And so our today is a very lucky because we have the native English speaker, Khenpo David, who is going to explain about the Heart Sutra. And I hope and I assure you that he can express 100% what we really the Heart Sutra really means. Because when you have a translator and when we have a different kind of a speaker, even though if we want to express our 100%, but it's really barely and really hard to come in that point like 100%. But as the native English speaker, as Khenpo David himself is native English speaker, he might deliver 100% what he wants to express and what it really says. So that's why I feel like it's quite lucky day. And I just got a message like Khenpo is already at the door. So please join us with me to welcome Khenpo David. And it's a traditional way, like when we have a teaching, like most of the time, even in the Buddha's time or during the teaching's time, what we do is most of the time the student will request the teacher to teach or preach or give the instruction. And so in order to follow that tradition, so first of all, we will just go through the Kagyu's lineage prayer, the supplication, and after that we will go the short mandala, and then after that we will request Khenpo David to give us teaching. So after the teaching, we will just do the dedications, and we have everybody have the books, golden books and supplication books. So we will just go through the pages, and we have in Mandarin and English as well. So I will just say aloud the page number, so you can just follow with the page number. Thank you so much. And Khenpo will first come and he will bow to the Buddha's the statue, and then after that Khenpo will take seat. Then you can bow down 3 times and take seat. But if you are not comfortable bowing, so which is absolutely fine. But if you like to do, then after Khenpo takes his seat, please bow 3 times and take a seat. Thank you. As I stated earlier, that we will go with the lineage prayer. So page number 6. Page number 6. Page number 28, the mandala offering. Page number 28. Page number 28 from the bottom page, the fourth line, the fourth sentence. Page number 28 from bottom of the page, the fourth line.
In the Dharma expanse palace of Akanishtas, the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind, is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Gurus. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And so now as we begin, first of all, I would like to say good morning, welcome. Thank you for joining us all here this weekend, or this morning in particular, of course, now that you're here in the morning. So I'm very happy to see all of you and make Dharma connections with some of you, renew Dharma connections with others, but I'm very happy to see all of you here this morning.
那么首先在开始之前呢，在这里欢迎大家来参加这个周末，尤其是今天早上的这个法会，所以在这里看到各位呢，非常的高兴，也是呢有机会跟大家结这个法缘。
I'm also very happy that, I've been doing a little bit of teaching on Saturday afternoons, but I can't speak Chinese. And so I'm also very happy that we have been translating into Chinese today so that we can have everyone or more people understand understand the teachings in the Heart Sutra. We often talk about multiculturalism. And so if we want to be multicultural, then we need to do what we can to accommodate everyone from multiple cultures. So I'm very happy that we can have these teachings translated also into Chinese.
那么除此之外呢，在每个周六呢，我会给予这个佛法的开示。那今天呢，也是特别高兴，因为呢有中文的翻译，那因此呢可以有更多的人来了解心经的意义。那么我们说推广多元的文化，那么也就是我们要努力的去配合服务每一个人，让他都能够明白佛法。
So with these greetings now, having done the greetings, I guess we need to speak about actually the most important thing we can think about this morning. More important than the subject matter is our motivation. if we have a good motivation, then even if we don't understand the subject matter, we don't think we understand the subject matter, then actually it's going to be beneficial for us. On the other hand, if our motivation isn't all that good, then no matter how well we understand the words, we won't be able to understand the meaning, or we will misunderstand it or try to put it to some improper use. And so it's very important for us when we begin anything that we do to first think about our motivation.
那么，所以在欢迎大家之后呢，我们就要进入今天的这个课题了。那么，我们说在这里最重要的，并不是所说的课题，而是大家的动机。那因为如果您有一个好的动机的话，那尽管你不是真的明白今天所讲的课题，但是因为这样的一个好的动机呢，你会得到利益。而相反的来说，如果动机是不好的、不正确的，那么尽管你了知了文字上面的意义，但是呢，你可能也会错误的了解，或者是说呢，把它用在错误的地方。那所以因此呢，动机是最重要的。
So I think we can probably take it as a given that all of us have good motivations for coming here and being here in general. But whether we remember them at the moment or not is a different matter. So it's important to remind ourselves that we should have as good a motivation as possible. The motivation to be able to bring benefit to ourselves and to all other sentient beings. And when we think about the different levels of benefit that we can give, then many of the different types of ways we can help other people or other beings are temporary. So if maybe we can think that we're here thinking about the Dharma, thinking about the Sutra, studying the Sutra, in order that we can be able to bring lasting benefit to all sentient beings.
那么说提到动机，那么各位来到此处呢，应该都是已经带着一个好的动机，但是此刻你是否还记得你的动机是好的，是否是好的？那所以呢，在这个时候我们要再次的升起利他的动机，那为了利己利他来听闻佛法。那关于利益众生呢，我们有不同的层次的帮助，不同的方法。那有很多的利益呢，我们能做的，它都是暂时的。那所以我们请升起为了给予众生持续的利益的这样的一个动机来意念佛法，来听闻经典。
So when we talk about benefit, lasting benefit, what we mean is happiness that does not end, happiness that does not depend on anything outside of ourselves, happiness that is just naturally there. This is what we in Buddhism call the state of Buddhahood. It's the lasting happiness that doesn't depend on any causes or conditions. It's just the recognizing and knowing our own natural state. And so, if you can, please think to yourselves that you'd like to listen, that you are understanding, listening to, and thinking about the Dharma in order to achieve such a state.
那么，当我们提到利益，特别是这个持续的利益，或者是不停止的利益呢，它代表的是它是永恒的不依靠自身的而且是自然的升起的。那么我们说这样的一种快乐呢，就是佛果，它是永恒的快乐，是我们自身自然的状态。那么所以我们来听闻佛法呢，要升起这样的动机，为了证得这样的一个佛果，来听闻明了佛法。
And so that wish to achieve that lasting state of happiness, the happiness that doesn't depend upon anything. That wish for ourselves is what we call bodhichitta, because we want to do this in order that we can achieve the state of Buddhahood. And when you achieve that lasting state of happiness, then you see how all other beings can also be brought to that state. And you have the wish to do that and to benefit all sentient beings. And so the wish to achieve the state of Buddhahood for the sake of all other sentient beings is what we call bodhicitta. So if you can, please listen with the motivation of bodhicitta, or if you're not certain what bodhicitta really means, which is actually probably just being honest with yourself when we come down to it. If you're not certain what it actually means, then think to yourself that you'd like to be able to understand it and really develop that motivation and listen with as good a motivation. In other words, you pretend that you have the motivation, because in a sense, thinking I'd like to have that motivation is having that motivation.
那所以我们这种愿望为了达成这种永恒的快乐的这样的一个愿望，它本身呢就是一个菩提心。那么当我们自己拥有这种永恒的快乐利益到自己，自然的我们也是会希望一切的众生都得到同样的快乐。那么所以呢为了一切的众生都得到这种永恒的快乐、永恒的佛果，那么就是菩提心。那么所以呢如果各位可以的话呢，请你带着菩提心，升起菩提心来听闻佛法。那么如果你不确定菩提心是什么的话呢，也许你是很诚实去观察内心，并不太确定菩提心是什么，那么也可以请各位尝试，可能是假装也好，或者是希望得到菩提心的动机也好，这样的心呢发心呢来听闻。那么呢，尽管你没有菩提心现在，但是希望得到菩提心，那么也是像是有菩提心一般的来听闻。
And so the Dharma that we're going to be speaking about this weekend is the Heart Sutra. But when we talk about the Heart Sutra, we think, oh, there's one Heart Sutra. We all know the Heart Sutra. But then especially those of you who speak Chinese will probably look at this Heart Sutra and say, wait a minute, this is different than the Heart Sutra I've read before. And those of you who look at this English will say, well, this is slightly different than I've heard before, unless you've seen my translation elsewhere. And the reason for this is actually there are a number of different versions of the Heart Sutra. There's basically, you can put them down into two versions. You've got the short version or the long version. But the long version is not very long, so you could say the short version and the very short version.
那么今天我们所开示的佛法呢是心经。那当我们听到心经的时候呢，经常我们会想到是一部的心经，但是呢，当我们可能看到我们的心经的文本的时候呢，可能会觉得特别是中文的心经，可能跟我们以前看到的不一样。那么看英文的话呢，英文版的心经也许跟你之前看到的也不一样哦。那么除非你是看到的是同样堪布翻译的版本。那么实际上呢，心经它是有很多版本的，它有长轨的，有短轨的。那么长的呢非常的长，短的呢是非常的精简。
And then if you look at it in even more detail, you see that there are more different versions, there are different translations. There are 6 different versions of the Heart Sutra in Sanskrit, some long, some short. There's one general one, but I think there are at least 2. I've seen 2 in Tibetan. There are probably more translations in Tibetan, one of the long form and one of the short form. In one article I was looking at, they said that there are 50 different versions in Chinese, and that there are dozens of versions in Japanese and Korean and probably English, and there are probably the most versions of all in English, because we English translators can't help but try to do our own versions of everything, so we've probably got most translations of all into English.
那么如果我们更细节的从细节当中来看呢，那么《心经》它有不同的版本，而每个版本本身呢也有不同的翻译的文本。那所以在版本当中呢，在梵文呢是有六版的梵文的《心经》，有长跟短的。那么当中翻译成为藏文的呢，堪布有看到的是有长轨跟短轨的。那么根据文献所说呢，中文版的心经呢有50版之多，有50版之多。那么在日文与韩文当中呢，也是有10几版的不同的心经哦。那么英文的翻译呢就更多了，因为很多英文的译者呢，把不同语言的这些心经呢，都翻译成他各自译者的版本。
And the Heart Sutra has, I think, an especially prominent place in Chinese Buddhism. Actually, it seems, if we look at the academic research, that the place where the Heart Sutra really took on first was in China. It was translated, traditionally it said it was first translated by Xuanzang, although it's not entirely clear that that was actually the case. It might have predated Xuanzang. And the first known commentaries or explanations of the Heart Sutra were written by Xuanzang's main students, Kuiji and Wonchok.
那么我们看心经的这个历史，特别是从学术上面来看呢，那么它首先是出现在中国的。那据说呢，首先翻译的这个版本呢是玄奘大师是玄奘大师的心经版本，但实际上这是并不是非常确定的哈。那然后关于他心经著作的这个论析呢，首先写的是他的弟子这个窥基跟圆彻大师，他的2位徒弟写了这个注解。
In the Sanskrit tradition, there are some commentaries or some Sanskrit commentaries that were translated into Tibetan and were preserved in Tibetan, but they seem to be a little bit later, the 7th or the 8th century, the 9th century. So Xuanzang was in the 7th century, so the Sanskrit commentaries that we know were actually a little bit later than the Chinese commentaries.
那么在梵文当中，它也有关于心经的注解，但是然后呢，它也是翻译成为藏文。那但是呢，它出现的时间呢是大概7、8世纪哦，所以比玄奘的心经翻译的时间呢是稍微往后的玄奘大概是7世纪的时候哦。
And so this sutra, the Heart Sutra, if we begin with it, we need to start by talking about the, start from beginning, you have to start from the title basically, the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Prajna. So the Heart of Transcendent Prajna, or in Sanskrit, the Prajnaparamita Hridayam Sutram.
那么我们讲心经这个一开始呢是要从心经的这个课题讲起哦。那中文呢是很简短的说心经哦，但是实际上他说的是般若波罗蜜多心经，所以 般若波罗蜜多呢，就是梵文的Prajnaparamita。
So here there are a couple of different levels we can look at the meaning of the title. The first, if we just look at it on a kind of, what do we say, a textual level. When you talk about Prajnaparamita there, we're talking about a group of sutras that the Buddha taught, the Prajnaparamita sutras.
那么从课题来看呢，它有不同层次的看法。那么在这里讲到的是般若波罗蜜多，所以佛陀如果从说法的分类呢，他有讲到这个般若经。
And so the Prajnaparamita sutras are what we call the main sutras in the second main cycle of teachings that the Buddha taught. So when we talk about the teachings of the Buddha, he taught different teachings in different places and different times for different students. And so in the first cycle of teachings, what we call the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma, he taught about the Four Noble Truths. And he taught these primarily, or starting in Varanasi, or in Sarnath, near Varanasi in India, and also in other places in India. Then the second cycle of teachings, or the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma, is the cycle of teachings on Prajnaparamita.
那么关于佛陀关于所说的般若经呢，或者是所说的般若呢，它是在二转法轮的时期所说的。那么当时佛在印度呢，他在不同的时间、不同的地点，针对不同的弟子呢给予说法。那么所以从它的时间划分呢，首先是一转法轮，他所说的是四圣地，而他是在 Varanasi 的这个地方呢，主要在那边宣说的。那之后呢，在二转法轮的时候，他讲的主要是般若。
And then there are also the teachings of the third cycle of teachings, or the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, and also the teachings of the Tantras. But we don't need to worry about those two cycles of teachings this weekend. We're primarily going to talk about the second one, the teachings on Prajnaparamita, or Transcendent Prajna. Now, in this cycle of teachings, there are a number of different sutras. The most famous ones, at least in the Tibetan tradition, is the sutra in 100,000 lines. So this is a version of the Prajnaparamita Sutra that is 100,000 lines or 100,000 verses of text. It takes 12. Is it 12? Yes, it's 12 different big volumes of Tibetan books. So it's a very, very long sutra.
那么之后呢，佛陀也给予了三转法轮的开示哦。那在当中，三转法轮也包含了密续。那但是今天我们说这个周末不是我们要讲的课题。那么在二转法轮当中，讲给予的般若的开示呢，它是有多部的经典。那么其中，那么最出名的一部呢，在藏文当中的是般若10万颂。10万颂般若10万颂，它是非常大部的经典。那么总共是有12大卷这么多的数量的经典。
So that's the longest of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, and it's extremely detailed. It goes through everything in about as precise detail as you can. And slightly shorter than that is what we call the medium length one, and this would be the sutra in 25,000 verses. So this takes 3 volumes in Tibetan. And then if you like something that's short, then we have the short Prajnaparamita Sutra, which is 1 volume or 8,000 lines.
那么般若10万颂呢是最长的，那之后有中等的，它是般若25000颂，那它总共是有3大卷了。那么短的呢是1卷的，它是般若8000颂。
Now, if you look at all of these sutras, what you actually see is that they're all pretty much the same. The difference is just how literally is the detail spelled out. For example, in the shorter sutra, it might say something like form is empty, feeling is empty, conceptions are empty, and so forth. And it might, and then it starts giving things in categories, saying the category of samadhis, the category of the 16 emptinesses are empty, and so forth. So it gives them in broader categories. In the longer sutras, it then goes through and spells out each and every different member of those categories in a longer and longer phrase. I'm not sure if I'm saying this clearly, but basically what it's saying is that it's going through, instead of, in the short sutras, instead of talking about things in detail, you're talking about them in smaller groups. And then the more detail you give, you get the longer sutras, but they're all essentially the same.
那么这些长中短的般若经呢，实际上它所说的意义都是一样的。那它的分别是在它的细节的部分，那么在比如在短的般若经当中呢，它可能会说色即是空啊，受想行识亦是空等等。那么之后它可能会讲到这些禅定的这个初分的分类。那么而在长的般若经当中呢，它是会对于每一个分类呢再深入的详细的解说，所以主要的是在它的细节展开细节的部分是不同，但是实际上意义是一样的。
And then the shortest of, there are several different somewhat shorter sutras, but the shortest of all of them is this Heart Sutra. And actually this Heart Sutra, if you look at it very carefully, it covers all of the meaning that is explained at great length in the 100,000 line sutra. It basically covers it all in just this one short sutra.
最短的般若经呢，就是心经。那么，如果我们仔细的去看的话呢，在般若10万颂的所有的意义呢，都含藏在这部极短的心经当中。
And I think that might be one reason why it's such a popular sutra, because if you want to read the sutra in 100,000 lines, if you can read very quickly, there are some Tibetans who can read one volume of that in a day. Some can read it even quicker than that. So if you want to read the 100,000 line sutra, you're talking about at least a week's work if you can read extremely quickly. Whereas this you can read in 5 minutes.
那么，也许这就是为什么心经是这么的广为流传的原因呢？因为呢，对于般若10万颂如果你要去阅读它的话呢，那么有一些藏人呢，也许他能够看得非常的快呢，一天呢可以看1卷，有的可能更快哦。但是总之，尽管你能够非常的快的去阅读，那么至少也要1周才能够把它看完。心经呢，5分钟你就大概可以把它都看完了。
So in this way, it's like the heart. It's got the essence of all of those sutras condensed down into something we can read very, very quickly.
那么，所以呢，它就如同我们的心一般哦，所以所有的这些经典的精髓呢，都浓缩含藏在当中。
Now, another interesting thing about this sutra that's come out in some recent research is actually when you look at the Chinese translation of this sutra, and you compare it to the Chinese translation of the sutra in 8,000 lines, there is a passage in the sutra in 8,000 lines that's almost exactly the same as this Heart Sutra.
那么，关于最近的研究呢，在中文的心经版本当中有一句，它与般若8000颂当中的基本是完全一样的。
So that sutra was translated by Kumarajiva. He was one of the great early Chinese translators. He lived in the 4th century and the early 5th century. So he translated the Long Sutra. And so that passage from the Long Sutra that he translated is pretty much exactly the same. A little bit condensed, but in ways that you'd expect. So it's basically the same words in Chinese in that passage of the longer, the 8,000-line sutra, as it is in the Heart Sutra. Now, the Sanskrit of the two sutras is different, but the Chinese translation is almost exactly the same. The meanings of these passages, the meaning of the Heart Sutra in the Sanskrit, and that corresponding passage in the 8,000-line sutra in Sanskrit are basically the same, but the words are slightly different in the Sanskrit. However, in Chinese, in the translations, the words are pretty much the same.
那么这8000颂的般若经中文翻译的译者呢是鸠摩罗什，那他是公元4世纪的人。那所以他翻译的版本，他翻译的这个版本当中的这一句呢，跟心经呢几乎是一模一样的。那也许是有一点点的浓缩，把它稍微的精简一点。那么所以尽管这个般若经不同版本它的意义是一样但是在梵文当中这个心经跟8000颂它的梵文那一句呢是不一样的，但是在中文当中却是几乎是一样的。
So what this means for us is that actually this means there are a couple of different ways that we can look at the words of the sutra, because we can look at the two different versions of the Sanskrit. Now, fortunately, I didn't have to go chasing through all the Sanskrit because these scholars already did it for me and they put it all together. And so you can look at some of the things that it says in the Sanskrit that we have, in the Tibetan that we have, and then you can sort of compare it with the other, and you can get a kind of different understanding. So it's actually really helpful for us to sort of compare these different things so we can understand the meaning of the sutra better.
那么，所以从此处呢，我们可以看到的是我们可以用不同的方式来观看这个文字，了解它的意义。那么所以像是Khenpo说的比喻，就是从梵文跟藏文它的不同的版本做一个比较呢，有的时候这个文字的差异也是可以给予我们带来不同的认知更深的了解。
So that's thinking about it in terms of the external level of the words and the textual tradition and all that. And there's, of course, a lot more that could be said about that, but we don't need to go on about it right now. If we think about what the actual meaning of the title is, the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Prajna, we first have to understand what do we mean by prajna.
那所以刚才说的是从外在的方式来观看文字观看传承是一个外在的角度。那么从内在或者是实在的意义来观看，那么这个课题般若波罗蜜多心经这个般若呢，它代表的意义是什么呢？So
this prajna, this word prajna, it's a Sanskrit word. Often it's translated in English as wisdom, but here, following the instructions of the Karmapa, I use the Sanskrit word prajna. What we mean by prajna is there's a capacity of discernment that we always have. With every moment we know something, we have the capacity of being able to know, is this Dharma? Is it not Dharma? Is it good? Is it bad? We have that capacity naturally, and it's always present there. And it's present in different levels. Sometimes it's kind of obscured, and sometimes it's kind of mistaken, particularly for us ordinary individuals. But when you unravel all of the mistakes that hide the actual nature, then you begin to see more clearly and clearly till ultimately you have the the prajna that sees the actual nature of how things are as they are. And that's what we're speaking about here, that prajna of seeing the ultimate nature as it is.
般若在梵文当中呢是prajna， 那么有的时候在翻译成为英文会说成是 wisdom 智慧，那有时候中文也会说智慧，那但是呢在这里堪布用的是它的这个梵文的名字就是 prajna， 也就是般若。那般若是什么呢？那般若它当中有它的意义呢是这个能力。也就是我们具有这种能够了知、能够觉知了知的能力，我们能够了知这是否法还是非法，它是好坏，而这样的一种了知的能力呢，它是一直都存在的。那这种能力呢，也许它有不同层次的这样的了知的能力，有的时候了知的能力可能被障碍，有的时候呢可能是一种错误的认知。那但是当我们把这些障碍去除，让这种能力展露的时候呢，那么这种般若的能力，它是能够帮助我们去真实的看事物的本性，它真实存在的这样的一种本性。
So we can call this prajna, the transcendent prajna, we can call it by many different names. We can call it emptiness, we can call it Buddha nature, we can call it non-dual wisdom. There are many different names that it's called by, and they're all the same thing, actually. Sometimes we get obscured by, we think that there are different names that you use, they mean something different. Actually, there are different ways of looking at the same ultimate nature of how things really are.
那么关于般若波罗蜜多呢，它有不同的名字。那所以有的时候我们会说它是般若，也可以称它为是空性，也可以说是佛性，或者是无二的佛智等等。那但是尽管名字不同，但是它所指的都是一样的。而有的时候呢，我们可能会被它的名字所迷惑。那实际上这些名字呢，只是我们去观看这种圣意自性的不同的角度、不同的方式而已。
And so this is called transcendent prajna. Now the word transcendent, there are many different ways that it's explained, but one explanation of it here is that transcendent, or paramita in Sanskrit, the Sanskrit word paramita means gone to the other shore or going to the other side. In other words, bringing you across the ocean or the rivers of samsara to the other side, to the state of happiness, of Buddhahood. So when we call this transcendent prajna, what we mean is that this is the prajna that brings us to that state. This is the wisdom, the discernment of the nature of all things that brings us to the state of Buddhahood.
那所以关于这个般若波罗蜜多或者般若它的意义是什么呢？那么在般若波罗蜜多当中的这个 Prajnaparamita， 它有代表的是去彼岸的这样的一个意思。Is that right? Prajnaparamita Khenpo? Prajnaparamita Khenpo.
Yes, paramita.
Paramita.
First talking about paramita, then talking that Prajnaparamita takes us to the other side.
Prajnaparamita, go to the other side.
Right.
Okay.
So if the paramita means going to the other side, it means it takes us to that ultimate prajna, that ultimate wisdom of the Buddha.
Okay. Prajnaparamita means going to the other side.
Yeah, bringing us. It means it's what takes us to the other side.
Okay.
Okay.
Paramita. 所以这个 Paramita 呢，它所代表的就是帮助我们去彼岸这样的意思，也就是超越了这个轮回之海而达到佛果。那是什么带我们到彼岸呢？带我们到彼岸的就是我们说的这个般若智慧，或者是我们的自信。
So the transcendent means that it brings us, this is the prajna, the discernment of the nature that brings us to the other side, to Buddhahood. And the nature of this is that it is beyond anything that we can think about. In Dharma language, we say it is free of elaborations. In other words, there's no idea you can really have about it. You can't say, it is this, it's that, it exists, it doesn't exist. It is in the center, it's in the edges. You can't say any of that because it's beyond any conceptual idea that we can have about it.
那么，所以带我们到佛果、到彼岸的这样的一种般若智慧，或者是我们的佛性、我们的自性，它是什么呢？它是超越一切概念的，超越思维的。那所以我们也称它为是离系的。所谓离系超越的概念的意思是呢，我们没有办法去思维它是否是这样，或者是那样，是否存在不存在，或者是它是否在中央或是在周遭。总之呢，它是超越我们的概念。
Now the other thing about this prajna is that the next important thing to know is that it's unchanging. It never changes. And if it never changes, that means it's actually already here. It's here now, in us now as sentient beings. Later, when we awaken to Buddhahood, it will still be there. It'll still be the same. It won't be any different. This is the nature of ourselves as we are now. So when we transcend, that means really actually coming to really know and see and thoroughly habituate ourselves to resting within our own nature as it actually is, because it is unchanging. It does not depend on any causes or conditions.
那所以关于般若的其中一个重点呢，也就是它是不变的。那所谓不变，它的意义也就是，既然它是不变，所以呢，我们说现在此刻我们就具有般若智慧。那所以众生跟佛他所具有的这种般若呢，它是一样的。那么所以我们去做的修持是让自己习惯于安住在这样的般若自性当中。这样的般若自性呢，它是不变，也就是呢，它不是因这个因缘而生的。
Now, the other aspect of this emptiness is that it actually can appear as everything that we see. It's unchanging in itself, and yet it appears in different ways as all the forms in everything that we see. So these are the three characteristics of this transcendent prajna, that it is beyond any conception, it's unchanging, and yet it appears in all different manners as everything that we perceive. Whether we recognize it or not is a different matter, but actually all the perceptions we have, everything we see, everything we think about, is actually the same in essence as the transcendent prajna.
那么另外的一个重点，般若的重点呢，也就是空性。那么它是空性的，但是呢，它却是它是空性，它不变，但是呢，却能够显现不变呢，显现成为不同的色相，我们可以去了知观察。那所以在这里般若的几个重点呢，就是首先它是超越概念的。 然后呢它是不变的，之后呢它是能够显现成为我们可以感知了知的各种的显象。那么不管我们是否能够觉知到这一点，也就是我们所感知到的一切，我们产生的念头，所观察的一切，它的本性，我们所看到的这些本性与般若的本性呢是一样的。
And then it's called the heart of the sutra, the heart of Transcendent Prajna. So the heart has a couple of different meanings. As I mentioned before, it's like the essence of all of these sutras, the 8,000, 25,000, and 100,000 line sutras on Prajnaparamita. It's like the essence or the heart of all of those. So that's one meaning. And another meaning of it is that it is like the essence of everything that the Buddha taught in those sutras. It teaches the absolute essence of that, the essence of Transcendent Prajna in this very short form. So it is the greatest presentation of it in a sense. So it is the heart of Transcendent Prajna. Another way you can think about it is that because it is so short and easy to understand, it's teaching the meaning with very few words. That also makes it into the heart of Transcendent Prajna.
那么在《般若波罗蜜多心经》当中的心呢？这个心它有代表的是精髓的意思，那也就是我们提到的般若10万颂、25000颂、8000颂，所有的般若经当中的精髓呢，都含藏在这一部心经。那第二个意义呢是，佛所说的一切法，它的精髓呢也是包含在此部经当中。那第三个方法，我们了解的方式呢是，因为它是非常的简短，而且容易明了，那因此呢，它就像是般若智慧当中的这个心脏，或者是像它的心水一般。
So that's the title, and then we come to the actual text of the sutra, and it begins with a sentence that basically every sutra, every tantra, everything that's taught by the Buddha, all of the sutras. Well, I didn't really explain the word sutra, did I? I should be thorough, shouldn't I? So we should talk about the word sutra. Basically, the sutra means one of the teachings that the Buddha gave, or that the Buddha had taught during his lifetime when he was in our world before he passed into nirvana. So that is what we mean by the word sutra. You could say, similar to the English word sermon, some people do translate it as a sermon, but this is, in Sanskrit, it's called a sutra. And a sutra is, it comes from the word to sew. It's like sewing up the meaning, showing it in concise form. And so that's what we mean by the word sutra.
那么，我刚才讲到的是心经题目的意义。那在进入第一句之前呢，首先我们先说什么是经呢？那经呢，就是佛在世直到他涅槃之间呢所说之法，所以这是这个经的意义，而经的梵文呢就是 sutra。
And so the actual first sentence of the sutra is the same first sentence that opens all of the sutras. It says in Sanskrit, evam maya shrutam. So thus did I hear. I heard this. What it shows us is that there was someone who heard this. And here it's Vajrapani. So Vajrapani heard the sutra, and he's remembered the sutra that he heard, and he recorded, he taught it later. So we know that someone heard it and then later taught it. So thus did I once hear.
那么在经文的第一句呢， 如是我闻，它是所有经典当中这个都开经的都这一句都是一样的。所以所谓的如是我闻，就是在这里呢，有人听到了，听闻到了，这个听闻的人或者是我呢，在心经当中的是金刚手菩萨，那他听闻之后呢，把它集结下来。
And so then the sutra continues saying, the Bhagavan was dwelling on Vulture Peak Mountain in Rajagriha together with a great sangha of monks and a great sangha of bodhisattvas. So thus did I once hear. Now the word once in that very first sentence can either mean that Vajrapani heard it on one occasion, or that there was an occasion when the Buddha was dwelling on Vulture Peak Mountain. It's a little bit ambiguous in Sanskrit and Tibetan, and it's explained both ways. So basically, one day, the Buddha was in Rajagriha, sitting on Vulture Peak Mountain, and he taught this sutra. The reason why it's important for us to know this is that when you know where it was taught and what the circumstances of it being taught were, then you have a greater ability to feel confidence in the words. It's not like just some sort of teaching, oh yeah, everything's empty, and so that's the end of the sutra. It's not that. It's saying this was taught on this occasion. There was someone who was there who heard it. There were other people there. This is where it was taught.
那么之后呢，经文是一时佛在王舍城，在王舍城，然后有的版本呢会说成在鸠峰山或者是灵鹫山当中，与大比丘众及菩萨众聚。那么在这里讲到的意识呢，它有藏文跟梵文呢有稍微不同的理解的方式。那这个意识呢，有的说是当时金刚手菩萨听到的时候，那也有呢是说也就是佛在这个王舍城鸠峰山当中呢的时刻。那么为什么在这里要说这些细节，要提到它的地点呢？那这是因为让我们听闻者呢能够产生信心知道它的这个原处并不是一部只是说什么都是空的这样的一个经典。
So the Bhagavan here means the Buddha. Bhagavan is one of we often talk about 10 different epithets for the Buddha, 10 different names for the Buddha. The Bhagavan, Arhat, the Samyak Sambuddha, the knower of awareness and, the causal. The one with awareness and means and so forth. There are different names that we give to the Buddha. Then the most common ones are Bhagavan, Buddha, Tathagata. These are all different names. And they kind of show different qualities of the Buddha. The actual word Bhagavan in Sanskrit is also the word that Hindus use for God, actually. It's the same word that they use. Like, they use it the same way in Christianity. People say the word the Lord. So if you want to talk about the Lord in Christianity, well, the Hindu equivalent of that is Bhagavan. And so when we call the Buddha the Bhagavan, this doesn't mean that the Buddha is a god. What it means is that the Buddha has been able to conquer all of the impediments that would prevent him from realizing the nature of things as they are. He has all of the great qualities that come from becoming a Buddha, and he has transcended all of the sufferings of this world. And so in this way, the word Bhagavan, you could translate it, I did see a translation like this once, as the transcendent perfect conqueror. But that's very long, so I prefer to just use the Sanskrit word Bhagavan.
那么在这个文本当中呢，我会用稍微跟可能各位看到的版本不一样，因为我用的是更接近可能堪布所说的这个版本。那么它是法成法师所译的。 那么所以在这里呢，他用的佛的名称呢是钵伽梵哦，所以钵伽梵呢，它是佛的10种名号之一，那么这些佛的不同的名称呢，它所代表的是佛不同的功德。所以所谓的这个钵伽梵呢，那么它是梵文或者是当时印度对于天神的这个称呼，或者是他们认为的这个梵天或者天神，他们都会称它为钵伽梵。那么在这里称佛为钵伽梵它并不代表说佛他就是神呢，它所代表的呢是佛他降服了一切障碍我们证悟自性的这些障碍，然后呢转化一切世间的苦成为这个超越转化的一切世间的苦。所以关于钵伽梵它的含义呢，在中文有一个说法呢，也就是去有快。所谓去有快，就是去除一切有快的，这有快就是世间的苦。
So the Bhagavan was dwelling on Vulture Peak Mountain in Rajagriha. So Rajagriha is the old name for the place that in the modern day is called Rajgir. It's a small city, large town in the state of Bihar. It's about 2 hours north of Bodh Gaya these days because we can travel by car. So it's not too far. I don't know, what's that, maybe 70, 80 kilometers, something like that. It's not very far from Bodh Gaya. And this was during the time of the Buddha. This was the center of the kingdom of Magadha. So this is where the king Bimbisara and later Jatashatru lived. And there's a mountain nearby called Vulture Peak Mountain. Now, when you go to Vulture Peak Mountain these days, and you can climb Vulture Peak Mountain. When you go up Vulture Peak Mountain, there's the main path that takes you up to the top of the very mountain where there's like some tourist trap stuff and a stupa and things like that. But that's not actually where the Buddha taught. There's another path that's not as well marked that you have to know, and that's the one you want. And you take that path, and it brings you around to this little small arm. It's like sticking off the mountain. You've got the main mountain here and then kind of curving around and sticking off. It's a little arm of the mountain. It ends in a bit of a peak where there's a nice place to sit where you can look down over the whole plain and see the city of Rajgir. So that is the place where the Buddha was sitting.
那么当时说法的这个王舍城呢，它是佛在是印度的一个小城市，或者是一个大的这个乡村哦，或者小的城市，或者是一个大的村镇。那么它大概呢是在现在我们菩提迦耶距离70公里以外哦，当时也是一个王国的这个The kingdom's name, Khenpo.
Oh, the king's name was Bimbisara. And then his son Ajatashatru.
And the kingdom's name?
The king was Magadha.
所以当时是这个 Magadha 的这个国的中心。那么在它的附近呢，有一个山峰啊，也就是这个鸠峰山，或者是灵鹫山。那么，如果我们去这个灵鹫山，现在走一条这个主要的道路，那么会到达一个旅客的可以说是旅游拍照的地方哦。但是这样的一个地方，它并不是佛当时所说的地点。那么如果你了知另外的一条小路呢，那么经过这个弯曲的小路，最后会到达的是在山峰当中的一处。那么从这个地方呢，你可以俯瞰一切这个王舍城的这个风景，而佛当时就是在这个山峰当中说法。
And so the Buddha was not there alone. He was together with a great sangha, or a great gathering of monks, and a great sangha of bodhisattvas. So there are sort of two categories of people there. So these include the bhikshus. These would have been the great beings like Shariputra, Maudgalyana, Kashyapa, all of the other great Buddhas. Many of their names are mentioned in the longer sutras on Prajnaparamita, but not in the shorter one. And the bodhisattvas includes all the great bodhisattvas like Manjushri, Subhuti, Vajrapani, and so forth, all of the other great bodhisattvas. So here, it's being the heart. So they're only mentioned as that there are a great number of the monks and the bodhisattvas together.
那么当时除了佛在这个灵鹫山呢，还有这些大比丘众跟诸菩萨摩诃萨。那么这些大比丘众呢，就是佛陀的弟子，所以像是舍利佛，还有其他的这些佛的这个弟子，这些弟子们呢，他都在哦。那么在长的般若经当中，他会一一把他的名字都说出来。这个诸菩萨摩诃萨呢，也是包括了像文殊菩萨、金刚手菩萨等等。那总之呢，在这里是精简的说为大比丘众与诸菩萨摩诃萨。
So at that time, the Bhagavan, or the Buddha, entered the samadhi of enumeration of dharmas called profound light. So the Buddha was sitting in meditation. Samadhi means meditation here. It means a very deep type of meditation where the mind is resting, what we say one-pointedly. He's resting in the samadhi without being distracted. And the name of the samadhi, it's the samadhi of the enumeration of dharmas called profound light.
那么，所以之后呢，尔时就是佛陀进入了甚深明了三摩地哦。那么这里所说的三摩地，所指的是禅定，也就是呢心安住在一点，不被干扰，这样的一种禅定的状态或者是名称呢，就是甚深明了三摩地。
So here in the name, light, profound light. Light, we think of light as being like, photons, whatever it is that makes it possible for you to see. But when you look at the Sanskrit word, or the Tibetan word, it also is often used to talk about mind, about knowing. When we talk in Mahamudra about the mind being the union of clarity and emptiness, knowing and emptiness, that's the same word. So it's the knowing quality of mind. So what it means is that the Buddha knew the profound light. So he knew the profound. Profound means the nature of emptiness. And what was this, the nature at the emptiness, the nature of? It's the nature of the enumeration of all dharmas. So in other words, what we're saying is that the Buddha was sitting in a meditation where he was seeing the nature of all of the different types of dharmas, which you can enumerate or list as the 5 aggregates, the 12 sense bases, the 18 dhatus or elements, or whatever other categories of dharmas. However you enumerate them, he was sitting there in samadhi, knowing or realizing the nature of all of them.
那么，在这里，三摩地当中的这个甚深明了的明，这个明呢，它本身也有光的意义。那所谓当我们想到光的时候，可能会想到光子。那但是实际上，我们说，在藏文或方文当中提到的所谓的光明或者是明，它所指的是心，是心了知的这样的一种特质。那么在大手印当中有提到的显空双运呢，他用的这个词呢，跟这个明呢是一样的。那所以在这里，佛进入甚深明了三摩地，这个甚深所代表的就是空性的本质，空性的本性。 也就是能够了知一切法本性的这样的一种特质或者是本性哦。所以当时佛坐在那边，然后进入这样的一种禅定当中，他是了知观看了，看到了一切的法，一切的现象，包括一切的佛法，那如同是五蕴、12处、18界等等。那总之呢，佛是处于这样的一种禅定当中。
Now, while the Buddha was sitting in that meditation, one of the other people or beings who was there also saw the nature of things. So also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Noble Lord Avalokiteshvara too, looking at the practice of profound transcendent prajna, saw that the 5 aggregates are empty of nature.
那么，所以当时除了佛在这种禅定当中，那么另外的一位行者呢，也是同样处于同样的一样的禅定，见到了万法的本性啊。那所以呢，他就是经文当中所说的观自在菩萨摩诃萨，然后提到的是他行深般若波罗蜜多。
So the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara. So Avalokiteshvara in Tibetan is, you probably know the Tibetan word better, many of you, Chenrezig, or Kuan Yin in Chinese, whichever name we call him or her, whichever form you see. It's the embodiment of the compassion of all the Buddhas, taking the form of a bodhisattva. So what is a bodhisattva? On the one level, you'd say a bodhisattva is someone who's decided, I'm going to achieve Buddhahood. They've made that decision. In fact, from the moment we have the ritual of taking the bodhisattva vow, once you take the bodhisattva vow, you can say, I'm a bodhisattva. A bodhi here means enlightenment. It means the ultimate nature, the realization of a Buddha. Sattva means is like someone who's got a lot of wants to make the effort, who has the courage to want to be able to achieve this, and has decided, I'm going to do it. So Avalokiteshvara here is the bodhisattva because he's making the efforts to achieve enlightenment. Mahasattva, Maha means great in Sanskrit. Mahasattva means the great being. So he's not just a bodhisattva, he's a great bodhisattva. Because someone like us, many of us have already taken the bodhisattva vow, and of course, the bodhisattva vow is it's kind of like voting in America. You do it early and often. You take the bodhisattva vow before you really know what you're doing. But once you have done it and you have trained long enough, then you actually see the nature of things as they are. And then you become like a great being. In particular, when you get to the highest levels of a bodhisattva. And that's what we call a bodhisattva. So what this means, in technical terms, we'd say that Avalokiteshvara is a bodhisattva who's dwelling on the 10th of the 10 bodhisattva levels, the highest level of a bodhisattva.
那么观自在菩萨，或者是我们中文称它为是观音啊。那藏文呢，是称它为 Chenrezig。那么总之呢，观音菩萨或者观自在菩萨呢，它就是诸佛一切悲心的总集。那在经文当中呢，是菩萨摩诃萨。那么什么是菩萨呢？菩萨它也就是代表下了决心要成佛的行者，那么所以从这样的角度来说呢，我们说领受了这个菩萨戒的行者，那都可以称为是菩萨。像我们如果受了菩萨戒，我们也可以称自己说呢，我是菩萨。但是这个菩萨呢，他 那么菩萨它是两个字哦，说菩跟萨。菩呢代表的是菩萨，代表的是菩提。菩提呢代表的就是佛果，而萨法或者是萨呢，它所代表的是努力，是具有勇气，为了证得佛果而做出努力。那所以在这里说的观音菩萨呢，所代表的是他为了证悟菩提、证得佛果而在努力的这样的行者。那除了是菩萨之外呢，他还有一个的是摩诃。那摩诃的意思呢，也就是大或者是伟大，也就是呢，所谓的这个伟大呢，也就是他是证的这个实地菩萨哦，他是见到我们说本质证的实地。那么堪布是给说一个例子呢，是对于我们一般的凡夫，像我们一般的修行人来说，我们领受菩萨戒就有点像在美国的投票，也就是你可以做这个提前的投票，而且会不断的投很多的次。那但是当你真正的在修持菩萨的这个菩萨道的修持到一定的程度之后呢，你会看到的是现象的本质。当你看到本质的时候呢，你就会变成一个大的伟大的行者。那么这样的一个伟大行者呢，他就是观音菩萨，而他证得是实地菩萨的果位。
So his name is Avalokiteshvara. So Avalokiteshvara has two parts to the name. The first part is Avalokita. Avalokita is the Sanskrit that they translated in Tibetan as Chenresi. And what it means is that he's looking. He's looking with his eyes. He's looking at all sentient beings with compassion. The second part of his name, Ishvara, it means that he's got power over it. It's the word for strength or power. He's able to actually do something to benefit other sentient beings. So that's why he's called Avalokiteshvara in Sanskrit. Now, he's the embodiment of compassion. So why is it that we have the embodiment of the compassion of the Buddhas here teaching the sutra on Prajnaparamita?
那么，所以观音菩萨他的梵文呢是 Avalokiteshvara。那么，它实际上是有两个含义。那首先呢是 Avalokita， 那么它翻译成藏文呢，就是我们说的这个 Chenresi， 也就是呢，它是带着慈悲心的，用这个悲眼呢来观看众生。那之后呢是 Ishvara， 它代表的是力量，也就是它具备这种利益众生的力量。那所以问题来了，那么在这个般若的经典当中，为什么是诸佛悲心总集的观音菩萨来宣说这个般若智慧呢？
The reason why it is here in this sutra, why it's Avalokiteshvara and not one of the other bodhisattvas who might have been in, who it is in some of the other sutras, but here it's Avalokiteshvara, it's because there are different levels of compassion. And when you have the highest level of compassion, such as Avalokiteshvara, you also have wisdom, you have prajna. You have the understanding of the true nature of all beings. So you understand that their nature is that they can become Buddhas. You also understand that the nature is that right now they're experiencing suffering, but that suffering is not real. They don't see it. We sentient beings don't see our suffering as unreal. We think it's real and harmful, but in actuality it is also empty. So they see this, they see that they can help sentient beings overcome or remove their suffering. And so it's great compassion that naturally comes out of knowing the nature of how things are. And so in this way it's teaching the compassionate nature of these teachings. It's not just emptiness that we're speaking about. We are taking these teachings, or we study the sutra not just to have some philosophical idea of what the nature of all things are, which may or may not be helpful, but we're doing it in order to really understand, in order to bring benefit to ourselves and to all other sentient beings. In other words, we're doing it out of a motivation of compassion. That is why we need to understand the true nature. And so this is what Avalokiteshvara is showing us here.
那么，之所以是观音菩萨在说般若经，而不是其他的菩萨，它的原因呢是，当我们提到这个慈悲心的时候呢，它有不同层次的慈悲心，而观音菩萨他的慈悲心呢，它是具备这个般若智慧的，也就是他了知了一切现象的本质本性，他也是了知一切众生他的自性，都具备这个佛性，都能够成佛。那但是尽管这样呢，众生却是受着苦难哦。但是这样的苦，我们凡夫看来是非常的难受的、难堪的这个苦呢，它实际上是非真的，是如幻的，是性空的。那所以，因为这样的观音菩萨，他要去帮助一切的众生来去除他们的苦。那所以在这里的观音菩萨的他的悲心呢，它是从智慧当中升起的，也就是从般若当中观看到万法的自性而产生的悲心。那也就是我们在这里的要明白的意义，也就是我们并不是为了从哲学的角度来了知万法空性而来学习这部经典，而是呢为了看到明了这部经典，明了自性，从而利己利他，所以是从慈悲心的角度来修学的。那这也是为什么此处是观音菩萨显现说法。
So I think that is enough for our morning session. We will get together again, what, at 2 o'clock, is that correct? 2 o'clock. So please now let us recite the dedication of merit that is on page 206. And as you recite this prayer, please think to yourselves that by the merit, that is by the good energy, if we want to be kind of New Age about it, by the good energy, the good vibrations of all of us doing something good together. May we dedicate this so that it brings benefit to all sentient beings, so that it brings them to that ultimate spot, that ultimate state of Buddhahood, the ultimate realization of transcendent prajna, so that they may be free of any type of suffering.
Page number 217.
Okay, so first the Chinese translation.
那么所以我们今天早上的开始呢，就先到这，然后下午呢2点我们再继续哦。那么现在要做回向是法本的206页。那么这个时候呢，我们要把所积累的功德回向。那功德呢，你也可以从我们说另外一个角度认知，是我们带着好的动机聚在这里所积聚的这种好的能量，或者是好的这种震动也好，我们把它都回向给一切众生，愿他能够证得都能够利益，能够证得最终的佛果，达到这种般若波罗蜜多去除苦难。所以带着这样的动机，我们来做回向。
Thank you very much.
we have prepared lunch for everyone. So if you'd like to join lunch, so please join in the dining hall. So first the monks will go ahead, and after that you can follow and wait for the monks to do the lunch offering prayers, and after that you can enjoy. And once you are done, and at the same time we need to wait for the dedication, and after the lunch, we have almost maybe around 1.5 hours. So if you like to take rest in the backyard, in the back of the monastery, we have a gardens and we have a seat, so you can go there and you can just take a rest. Thank you. And if you